The psychology of the trickster, in light of Carl Jung's work, explores the archetype of the trickster as a representation of the shadow in the human psyche. Jung suggests that recognizing and integrating these shadow aspects is crucial for achieving psychological balance and authenticity. The analysis of the trickster from Jung's perspective provides insights into the complexity of the psyche and emphasizes the process of self-reflection for personal development. Possibly, there is no figure in literature more intriguing than the trickster one, appearing in various forms in the myths of diverse cultures. It differs from the persona of the naive, who is harmless but equally unsuspecting, often causing harm to themselves. The naive traverses their journey joyfully, dreaming of all their adventures, without realizing that one more step could lead them into the abyss. The trickster one is sharp and crafty. It constitutes the eternal origin of all rogue creations in world literature, resisting reduction to a single literary entity. Narratives involving trickster ones date back to ancient times and are considered foundational to civilization and culture. They are integral to the most ancient expressions of humanity. Trickster ones defy norms, personify evil, are masters of deception, and transgress boundaries. The best way to describe the trickster is simply to say that where the limit will be found, sometimes delineating the line, sometimes surpassing it, occasionally erasing or moving it, but always present, the god of the threshold in all its forms. Trickster ones are constantly on the road, exerting control over the middle ground. While we try to trace the origin of the trickster one, it continues to elude us, being elusive and constantly surpassing our attempts at conceptual definition. Perhaps the first lesson the trickster teaches us is that, regardless of what we do, it will always be one step ahead. The victims of individuals like swindlers and sellers of miraculous solutions are those who do not recognize the trickster one, deceived by their own naivety, greed, or self-delusion. We need to cultivate a light trickster to guard ourselves against deception. There are also people who genuinely believe they are helping others but inadvertently engage in a form of deception. In this context, both the perpetrator and the victim are oblivious to the trickster one. The trickster becomes disturbing when it acts unconsciously in our lives as an autonomous entity. Another manifestation of the trickster can occur when someone is not deceiving but speaking the truth, although we often do not believe in this sincerity. In medieval times, the court jester was known for speaking the truth without losing their head. They were the only ones authorized by the king to expose things as they really were, becoming a relevant figure in royal courts. The trickster one emerges in our consciousness as we begin to develop our ego in childhood. It is a primitive progression toward the hero myth, an essential stage for maturation and achieving fullness. The trickster's cycle corresponds to the oldest and least developed phase of life. The trickster is a figure whose physical desires dominate their behavior. They maintain the mindset of a child. Without purposes beyond satisfying their primal needs, they are cruel, cynical, and insensitive. Initially taking the form of an animal, they transition from one malicious prank to another. However, a transformation occurs along this trickster path. At the end of their trickster journey, they begin to take on the physical appearance of an adult. The trickster one rebels against restrictions and authorities. Like the ID, the instinctive unconscious component present since birth, the source of immediate gratification, bodily needs and desires, emotional impulses and drives, in constant conflict with the superego, the internalization of cultural rules guiding us toward socially acceptable actions. Trickster ones often have an intense libido and frequently explore scatological themes. An initial and innocent manifestation of the trickster occurs when parents play hide-and-seek with their children to provoke laughter. The trickster one manifests when we are excessively serious, rigid, bound by rules and schedules, losing our sense of humor. It makes us forget what we intended to remember, say things we regret, or presents itself as a Freudian slip, eliciting laughter. Perhaps no philosopher has explored the importance of laughter as eloquently as Nietzsche. He states, "I would really distinguish philosophers by the category of their laughter, even those capable of laughing at gold. And supposing even the gods engage in philosophy, I doubt not they know how to laugh in a superhuman and new way, and at the expense of all serious things. The gods delight in mockery, even when it comes to sacred actions, they seem unable to stop laughing." Laughter serves as a mediator between the sacred and the profane, where the trickster one resides. It represents a stance toward life and oneself, especially laughing at oneself. Laughing is a deep inner work, breaking through our personality and connecting us to a deeper message. The trickster one pinches us, indicating that life is a play. We are actors on a vast stage, following a predetermined script. However, it also encourages us not to strictly follow the script, to improvise, not to be afraid of mistakes, but to laugh at those mistakes. We have the freedom and responsibility to do so. This is a central element of existentialist philosophy, instructing us to be authentic and discover our true essence. We can deceive or be deceived by others, but we can never deceive ourselves. The trickster one forces us to confront the persona we project to impress others, at the expense of our instinctual needs, creativity, and playfulness vital to our daily energy. The trickster one opposes any form of authority, always seeking its benefit before others. It challenges rigid boundaries and questions fundamental assumptions about the structure of the world, revealing the possibility of transforming them, even if, at times, for questionable purposes. It urges us to question who holds power and the restrictions and norms imposed on us. Its energy penetrates and questions, trying to awaken us as individuals and as a society. It intervenes and points, asking culture to examine its own madness, addressing complex issues with intelligence and humor, illuminating dark areas and drawing the public's attention to society's weaknesses. Comedians play a crucial role in conveying the trickster one's message, often at the expense of their own mental stability. They are important figures contributing to society as a whole. When comedy is suppressed, the consequences are severe, as the trickster one remains unconscious. If ignored, it resurfaces in the form of neurosis. Doubt is a precursor to change, and the trickster one is intrinsically linked to it. The problem is not doubt itself, but the fear of change. Facing the risk of doubt is essential for individual growth. As an agent of transformation, the trickster one awakens our fear of change, being a restless yet essential companion on our path to growth. The origins, vitality, and durability of culture demand space for figures that disturb exactly what cultures are based on. The totality of life is composed of order and chaos, and the spirit of this chaos is the trickster one. It is the Dionysian god of wine and music, connecting us to instinctive forces beyond the limits of civilization. It seeks to break conventions, leading us to wild and untamed territories. Nietzsche, self-proclaimed the last disciple of the philosopher Dionysus, wrote, "I tell you, one must still have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Without chaos, society loses its culture, becoming flawed, obsolete, and bureaucratic. Thus, the trickster one not only destroys old values but creates new ones. It reshapes the world around it with inner magic, continuously transforming the old into the new. Despite all its disturbing behavior, tricksters are regularly honored as creators of culture. It is imagined that they not only stole certain essential goods from heaven and gave them to the human race but also helped shape this world to make it a hospitable place for human life. In addition to being a creator, the trickster one teaches us that we all possess the capacity for destruction. The trickster one is simultaneously creator and destroyer, giver and denier, the one who deceives and is constantly deceived by themselves. Those who appear extremely kind or pure on the outside, repressing their true emotions, may suddenly become self-destructive or engage in sinful behaviors. Intuitively, we sense that something is wrong with this person, that they are adopting a personality. It seems like the trickster one is instigating them to behave exactly the way consciousness prohibits, while also tricking them into revealing this about themselves. We should not seek extremes but rather achieve balance and reconcile our darker aspects. The psyche seeks compensation to achieve this balance and totality. By disrupting conventions, the trickster one is often interpreted negatively. However, this is a misconception, as it knows neither good nor evil, being responsible for both. It has a playful facet, and that is what defines it. The trickster one does not follow moral or social values, yielding to its impulses and desires. However, its actions generate the existence of all values. Its creative intelligence surprises us, keeping alive the possibility of transcending conventional social constraints. Unlike the devil, an agent of evil, the trickster one is amoral, not immoral. Ethics is a component of social structure and individual consciousness. The unconscious, in turn, does not submit to our norms. The trickster encapsulates the paradox of the human condition, occupying a liminal singularity that is not entirely one thing or another but both at the same time. As humans, we face the challenge of understanding paradox, contradiction, and assimilating the idea that unity can exist beneath apparent duality. The trickster is often associated with specific animals, taking forms such as the fox, crow, monkey, coyote, hare, or spider, among others. Its form is not stable, resembling a liquid, malleable substance. The trickster can adeptly take on any disguise and mimic other animal forms, but its energy is recognized by the nature of its mutability and incendiary actions. Regardless of the form it assumes, the trickster is a primordial being equated with gods and heroes of mythology. In Greek mythology, Prometheus is a trickster who stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity, displeasing the gods who saw humanity as unprepared to use this principle in a creative and altruistic manner. However, this action is what made us human, as fire was crucial to human evolution. At this point, a paradox arises, as that which is necessary for the progress of the human species can also be capable of destroying it. This can be compared to artificial intelligence or singularity. When the trickster is punished, stupidity emerges as a substitute. Prometheus is punished by the gods and replaced by his brother Epimetheus. Prometheus is the forethought, thinking before acting, while Epimetheus is the afterthought, acting before reflecting. It can be said that within them is divided a primitive, cunning, and foolish being at the same time, creating a duality. Another trickster figure is Br Rabbit, a character in African American folktales, portrayed as oppressed and weaker than his opponents, gaining the sympathy of the audience. In the stories, he faces problems due to his mischievous nature, using his intelligence and trickster to deceive larger and stronger animals, control the situation, and escape troubles. Anansi, the spider, is an African trickster, a morally ambiguous character who deceives both humans and gods, using its ability to change shape to adapt to its adventures. In parallel, in Native American culture, Iktomi is a spider trickster spirit, once wise but stripped of the title due to its problematic methods. Its tricks often fail, and its stories are told as lessons for the young. Iktomi grants dream amulets to people for protection. The legends reveal a mix of respect, fear, and mockery, with its power to manipulate humans like puppets and the ability to create potions that affect the gods. According to a prophecy, its web would spread across the land, interpreted as the telephone network and later the Internet, the global network of computers. Iktomi has been considered, since time immemorial, the patron of new technologies. The myth is an expression of the psyche speaking to itself, and many Native American peoples view Iktomi as the god of the Europeans, who, according to them, follow its bizarre behavior and self-deceptive tricks. The coyote is another significant figure of the trickster in Native American folklore, while the European equivalent is Reynard the fox. In Norse mythology, Loki is one of the most popular trickster figures, the god who, through tricks and mischief, causes the death of Baldur, the most beloved god. Loki is considered guilty and punished, and the gods know this is a harbinger of Ragnarok, the fall of the gods and the cosmos itself they sustain. In other words, imprisoning the trickster can result in the destruction of the world. In Greek mythology, Hermes is a mischievous thief, as well as a benevolent creator who gifted humanity with fire and music. His divine status, however, is ambiguous in his birth, initially an outsider aspiring to become an insider. Through his early tricks, like stealing Apollo's cattle, Hermes gains the admiration of Zeus and secures a place on Mount Olympus, the home of the Greek gods. Hermes is a divine trickster, psychopomp, and messenger of the gods, transcending the boundaries between man and God, matter and spirit. He is the only god capable of traversing the three realms, Mount Olympus, Earth, and the underworld, serving as a mediator between the world of dreams and waking life. When his city is invaded, Hermes disguises himself as a simple shepherd, carrying a ram through the city to ensure safety. This action recalls the image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, leading the lost sheep back to the flock. The trickster god also possesses a protective energy, and many tribes use masks to embody his spirit, abandoning their personalities and being possessed by the trickster. Rituals are fundamental elements of the trickster, as without the ritualistic context, the presence of the trickster is absent. The tribe's behavior becomes eccentric, comedic, and rude, but this sacredness connects these characteristics to fertility, well-being, and joy. In the ambiguous nature of the trickster, we perceive the close connection between the domains of the sacred and the profane. The trickster resonates deeply with the human experience, playing an essential cultural role. By better understanding the trickster, we understand ourselves, especially in relation to the unconscious aspects that respond to the disruptive and transformative behavior of the trickster. In describing trickster phenomena, we are indeed describing intrinsic aspects of our own nature. The trickster acts as a mirror of the mind, a speculum mentis, shared by all of humanity, providing a view of the world and ourselves at a certain moment in history. The challenge lies mainly in the psychological realm, an attempt by humans to resolve their internal and external conflicts. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung identifies the trickster as an archetype, part of the collective unconscious, an inherited and universal structure present in everyone, deeper than the personal unconscious acquired throughout life. Archetypes are primordial patterns of the ancestors' experience, originating psychic symbols that attract energy, structure, and ultimately contribute to the creation of civilization and culture. The trickster is omnipresent, representing an eternal state of mind. These archetypes manifest transculturally as recurring images, symbols, and motifs in myths, religions, and art throughout history. There are various examples of archetypes, such as the wise old man, the great mother, the hero, and the trickster, the latter challenging all others. Jung argues that there are as many archetypes as typical situations in life. Although we cannot directly observe them, they exert great influence on our personal activities and thoughts. They inhabit the deep and dark place where impulses and instincts emerge, considered organs of the soul and the fabric of the unconscious structure. If archetypes accumulate sufficient energy, they can exert control over the individual. The unconscious is older than consciousness, being primordial and the source of consciousness. Therefore, our conscious life guides our actions, but something can only arise in consciousness if it has roots in the unconscious. The mythological characteristics of the trickster extend to the highest spheres of human spiritual development. In the Middle Ages, strange rituals occurred during religious services, with masked people dancing, singing indecent songs, and performing unorthodox actions in the middle of the church. These pagan rituals were widely accepted, requiring significant efforts to free the church from these practices. The myth of the trickster mirrors a prior and rudimentary stage of consciousness, a collective personification that arises from a group of individuals and is accepted by each as something familiar, which would not be the case if it were just a consequential individual. If the myth were merely a historical vestige, we would have to inquire why it has not disappeared long ago into the vast repository of the past and why it continues to exert its influence in the upper strata of civilization. The trickster indicates a primitive stage of consciousness that existed before the emergence of the myth. Only when our consciousness reaches a higher level could we detach ourselves from our previous state and reflect upon it. He, the trickster, is a precursor to the Redeemer and, as such, God, man, and animal simultaneously. He is both subhuman and superhuman, a bestial and divine entity whose most striking and alarming characteristic is his unconsciousness. He is so unconscious of himself that his body does not constitute a unity, and his two hands contend with each other. The trickster is a primitive cosmic entity of animal divine nature, superior to man due to his superhuman qualities, but inferior due to his unconsciousness. The trickster myth, like many other myths, supposedly has a therapeutic effect. It keeps before the eyes of the more developed individual the previous intellectual and moral level so that he does not forget how things were yesterday. The so-called civilized man has forgotten the trickster. He remembers him only in a figurative and metaphorical way when, irritated with his own ineptitude, he speaks of fate playing tricks on him or of bewitched events. He never suspects that his own shadow, hidden and seemingly harmless, possesses qualities whose dangerousness surpasses his wildest fantasies. For Jung, the trickster is part of the shadow, both dangerous insofar as we keep them hidden from ourselves and project them onto others. He writes, the trickster is a collective shadow figure, a sum of all the lower character traits of individuals. And as the individual shadow is never absent as a component of personality, the collective figure can be continually constructed from it. Not always, of course, as a mythological figure, but as a corresponding projection in other social groups and nations, a result of the increasing repression and neglect of original mythemes. The collective energy of the trickster is present in someone who appears to be a leader but is, in fact, a great impostor, someone who convinces the people by promising truths but delivering lies. This figure emerges, disappears, and resurfaces throughout human history. We think the danger lies in one who tries to invade our home, but we know little about the dangers of the unknown and repressed part of ourselves that makes us lose ourselves. A we hiding behind ourselves should scare ourselves more. The trickster guides us to the rabbit hole, to the depths of our unknown selves, to the valley of the shadow of death. However terrifying it may be, the trickster helps us discover depths within ourselves that we were unaware of. While the shadow helps us understand our morality, the trickster is focused on helping us reduce the sin of pride. It prevents us from trusting ourselves too much, as arrogance foretells a fall. The trickster is crucial in individuation, as it assists in deflating ego inflation when we become controlling, arrogant, or narcissistic. The healthy ego is our perception of who we are, serving as a bridge to the inner world. The trickster is the expert at demolishing the ego, helping us become more realistic about our psychological limitations and, ultimately, about our unlimited spirituality. This is an energy within us and the universe that humiliates us, breaks down our ego, disrupts our plans, shows how little our desires matter, and dissolves forms that no longer serve us, although we may be attached to them to save our lives. When the ego is at its peak, the trickster takes a pin and bursts our bubble of greatness, and as we begin to see the reality of things, everything we thought had meaning, power, money, fame, pleasure, becomes meaningless. The trickster helps us humble ourselves and tells us that our power is limited in the vast universe. This surrender is a necessity for self-realization and a connection with the divine. Instead of the great helping the humble, the trickster reverses this and disguises himself as someone very humble, but this humble person surpasses the so-called great person, the one with an inflated ego. The Bible has a passage that clearly expresses this trickster energy, "But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And base things of the world, and things which are despised, hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are." No matter how humble you are or how utterly useless you may feel in life, there is always something in the higher self or in God that still calls you. In alchemy, the trickster archetype manifests as the indescribable symbol of Mercury, the Roman equivalent of Hermes, fluid as Mercury. Jung writes, "A curious combination of typical trickster motives can be found in the alchemical figure of Mercurius, for example, his taste for malicious jokes and mischievous pranks, his powers as a shapeshifter, his double nature, half animal, half divine, his exposure to all sorts of tortures, and, last but not least, his approach to the figure of a savior." Mercurius skillfully maintains the duality of spirit and matter and is associated with the lapis philosophorum, philosopher's stone, or the self. He is paradoxically associated with both Christ and Lucifer, the bringer of light. Compared to the purity and unity of the Christ symbol, Mercurius lapis is ambiguous, dark, paradoxical, and entirely pagan. It represents, therefore, a part of the psyche that certainly has not been shaped by Christianity and cannot in any way be expressed by the symbol Christ. On the contrary, as we have seen, in many respects, it points to the devil, who is sometimes known to disguise himself as an angel of light. The paradoxical nature of Mercury reflects an important aspect of the self, the fact that it is essentially a union of opposites and cannot be anything more if it wants to represent any kind of totality. The elusive philosopher's stone, a central symbol of alchemy that allows the transformation of base matter into gold, is the product of a true trickster, Mercurius, who led alchemists to despair. For Jung, the philosopher's stone is not found externally but within ourselves. It can be said that the trickster, in the form of alchemical Mercury, contains the totality of the psyche, both the unconscious and conscious mind, the known and the unknown, and the light and darkness within all of us. The psyche seeks balance, not remaining in extremes but in a combination of opposites. The transcendent function in alchemy is where the psyche finds the middle ground. This happens when the right time comes, i.e., in synchronicity. In a way, too little or too much are the tricksters, extremes are how we are deceived. However, the trickster is trying to point. us to the center, to the path of individuation. This recalls what Aristotle said about virtue, which is a point between deficiency and excess of a characteristic. For example, the middle ground of confidence is between self-deprecation and vanity. As one becomes more balanced in life, they also achieve psychic wholeness. Tricksters are always on the stage, trying to show culture its shadow and the inevitable changes that are underway. In mythological terms, the battle between the forces of creation and destruction, personified by the trickster polarity, is as alive and present in the modern world as it was for our ancestors. The trickster enters the world stage through the psyche of the individual. We must come to an understanding with internal conflicts to gain more clarity about the external conflicts in which, as a culture, we are immersed. The integration of the trickster archetype allows us to stop being ruled by our own egocentric ego for a new way of living, one with integrity and relationship. It allows us to become aware of our true emotions, behaviors, and thoughts that our unconscious personality is hiding, without which there is no individuation. In other words, the trickster allows us to discover ourself, the totality of the personality that unites the opposites of consciousness and the unconscious and holds everything together in balance and unity. The trickster tries to awaken us and in the process shakes us to the core of our being. Perhaps it is because he embodies fundamental patterns against which we fiercely struggle and desperately need to reconcile within ourselves and our world. Through negotiation and transgression of conventions and boundaries, the trickster expands the domain of human potential. Although the trickster may bring us difficult lessons, he is also the force that allows us to imagine and create entirely new possibilities. In the history of the collective, as well as in the history of the individual, everything depends on the development of consciousness. This gradually brings about the liberation from imprisonment in unconsciousness, and the trickster is therefore a bearer of light and also of healing.